Hey guys, last year I purchased a Freelap Timing System and I thought I would share my experience with it so far. My motivation for purchasing it started 2 years ago when I got back into sprinting. For my winter season, I was using my wristwatch to time my training runs, which was quite awkward. So for the outdoor season, I bought a proper stopwatch complete with lap timer. While I don't run laps, the functionality allowed me to get split times within my run. So if I did an 80-meter training run, I might press the lap button at 40 and 60 meters while sprinting. As you can imagine, that wasn't ideal either, and it was taking a lot of focus from the actual execution of my runs. I bumped into another sprinter at the track who had a Freelap system and he was happy with it, so I decided to get one for myself. So what is the Freelap system? It's an automated timing system for recording your training runs. Instead of the traditional timing gates you may be used to, Freelap has these yellow cones. You don't need to create a gate with the cones, you only need a single cone and then a receiver chip which is secured to your waistband. A cone is turned on by holding the button for a few seconds, and then single presses allow you to choose whether the cone is a start, an intermediate lap cone, or a finish cone. The cones emit an electromagnetic field, and as you get within a certain distance of it with the receiver chip, it will register you passing it. You then position your phone after the finishing cone and use the My Freelap app to receive data from the receiver chip via Bluetooth. The chip carries a unique ID which you pair with your app so it knows to accept data when in range. In terms of kit, there are some optional extras. I have the Freelap TX Touch Pro, and from a 3-point or block start, you place your thumb on the button for a few seconds and releasing it would start the timer. For a little more money, you can get the Pro Pad, which is the same concept, but a slightly more convenient pad versus the button. There is also an E-starter. This replicates a starting gun, which will sound after a variable length of time. Since I use the Touch Pro, it would mean I need to add my reaction time to get a true comparison to electronic timing. Okay, let's see it in action. Here I am at the track. I have 4 cones, my mobile phone, my receiver chip, and the Touch Pro. I'm going to run 80 meters with intermediate splits at 30, 40, and 60 meters. As my local track doesn't have markings, I've already marked it out with some other cones and my measuring wheel. Since the cone signal extends roughly 1.5 meters, you're encouraged to place the cone 80 centimeters beyond where you want to record. My first cone is therefore going to be placed 30.8 meters from the start, and for convenience, I've learned to measure out 80 centimeters with my hands. Since I'm using the Touch Pro to start the timer, my first cone will register a split time, so I've set it to lap. I'll do the same for the second cone placed at 40.8 meters, and then the third at 60.8, and finally I'll set a finishing cone at 80.8 meters. I'll then open the app, press the plus button to start a new session, add a description, and then press start. This notification pops up reminding you to place your phone 1 meter off the ground and between 5 and 50 meters after the finishing cone. I personally like to set my phone between 12 and 15 meters after the finishing cone, and while I do bring my tripod for important training runs, most of the time I'm just using my shoe to raise it slightly off the ground. I'll then walk back to the start, set up my Touch Pro behind the start line, and attach the receiver chip to my waist as shown in the user guide. From a 3-point start, I will then complete my run and hope that I hear a beep after I cross the finish line, which tells me my phone has received the data via Bluetooth. The app is very simple. Your latest time is displayed at the top, and a drop-down allows you to see the split times. The way I set it up means you need to remember how far apart your intermediate cones were, but since I only use multiples of 10 meters, it's pretty obvious based on the times. There is another mode where you create an exercise and set the intermediate distances. That output then gives you average speed splits in a variety of different units, has other functionality like highlighting your fastest or slowest times, or the time gap to your best time. The gates are accurate to 0.02 of a second and only require 0.7 seconds between splits, so even Usain Bolt could get a 10-meter flying run. If you wanted to set up for a flying run, you could either keep it the same or change the first cone to a start cone and not bother with the Touch Pro, which would free you up to do something like a falling or rolling start. I've been using the Freelap system 2 to 3 times a week for the last 10 months, and I have to say it is one of the best purchases I've made in recent years. I am pretty tight when it comes to spending money, so this was really splashing out for me. I spent around £700 on eBay. Turned out that I bought 2 sets of 2 cones, so I have a second Touch Pro and receiver chip, Now that I've had the luxury of multiple split times, there's no going back, so I have no plans to downsize my cone collection. I love how quick it is to set up. I have a few minutes break between my last warm-up run and my first proper sprint, and that's enough time to set up the cones and my phone. The runs are numbered in the app, so if you have a good description, you'll know which runs the times correspond to. I like to create a new session for my longer runs just so it's easier to look back on. For historical data, there's a monthly calendar view and it highlights the days where you have recordings. I don't really use the exercise feature unless I'm doing lots of repeats at the same distance. So some days it's 2 sets of 60, 70, 80, others it's 2 sets of 360s. I'm not sure how I coped before I had this level of accuracy, which as I say is around 200ths of a second. For someone who spends all year trying to run faster in a straight line, it seems weird that I was relying on inconsistent hand timing to assess my progress in what is, the most important part of my training week. To then wait for a fully automated race time to know if I've made any progress that season seems such an inefficient way to go about it. Having accurate real-time feedback has really accelerated my learning in terms of figuring out what works for me, and I'll cover a few of those examples now. Firstly, I've heard coaches talk about the 3% rule or the 5% rule, which states that if your training run isn't within 3 to 5% of your best time, then it isn't sufficient enough to make you faster. Having data that I can trust is huge for knowing when I'm fatigued and should cut a session short. While most of the time I can gauge how I'm feeling, sometimes I'm feeling sluggish and running fast, others I'm feeling quite sharp but actually running slow. I experiment a lot with certain running cues, and Freelap can tell me straight away if it's led to faster times. One of my earliest improvements was a cue that Dwayne Chambers uses during the acceleration phase, which is to pretend that you're running downhill, and that instantly took around 500ths of my 30-meter time. For flying runs, I learned that a very relaxed first step allows me to get a higher top speed, and I found that my times are faster if I pretend the first cone is a speed camera and I'm trying to register the highest speed as I pass it, versus just trying to get to the first cone as fast as possible. I've started using a timed 30-meter 3-point and flying 20 run during the warm-up of my competitions to gauge the shape I'm in. In my final indoor race, I registered 4:20 and 2:14, and if you add 0.2 seconds for reaction, you get incredibly close to the 60 meter from blocks that I ran 20 minutes later. I know the average reaction time is more like 0.15, but I believe there's another few hundreds where you've started moving, but your thumb hasn't released the button. So 0.2 seconds is what many athletes with Freelap use. It's not all rosy, so before you rush out and buy a set, I'll fill you in on the negatives. I took my data from the last 50 speed sessions. One column represents a full session and one row is a single run. You can see I do between 4 and 10 sprints on a given day. I've used green when the run recorded perfectly, red when it didn't record at all, and yellow for partial times, which is when the Touch Pro didn't register, but I got split times later on. Out of 331 training runs, 300 recorded perfectly, 15 failed to register the Touch Pro, and 16 didn't pick up anything at all. As I said earlier, I have been placing the phone on a shoe sometimes, so a lot of that is on me, but some of these have occurred with a tripod. You can see a lot of the time it fails on the first run, and other times it fails mid-workout, which is often the first run at a new distance. The Touch Pro has been more temperamental lately. I'm very careful to hold it long enough for the lights to change, but for some reason I often miss the start and my times record from the first lap cone. If I do set it a meter off the ground, for me it means using my tripod, which has a habit of blowing over as my local track is quite windy. More generally, the wind negates a lot of the effectiveness of Freelap timing. This would be great indoors, but outdoors you're having to guess what the wind speed is. When you're trying to measure improvements by the 100th of a second, it's quite frustrating when the wind can change it by tenths of a second. Another weather condition to watch out for is rain. Luckily, all the kit is water resistant, but that still leaves your phone. I had a waterproof phone pouch lying around, and that's worked well for me. Lastly, something I've been conscious of is the opportunity for theft. I'm lucky enough to have a very quiet running track in a safe town, but there are tracks I've been to where I'd be concerned about setting my phone 80 or 100 meters away and then leaving it unattended while I walk down to the start line. As I want to give you a thorough review, I'll quickly cover 2 of the features I don't use. If you wanted to time a multi-lap race, they have examples in their user guides. The general idea is to have the start cones in the outer lanes so that you don't set them off every lap. You then have an intermediate cone for 200-meter splits and the finishing cone for full laps. Another setup is for two athletes running either together or one after the other. If they're running at the same time, they need to be in the lanes next to each other with the cones in the middle. If they're using the Touch Pro, they would need one each, and when creating a new workout, you'd select team instead of single. Since I have two receiver chips, I tried this out with my daughters in the garden. They did a 10-meter flying run and it worked well. The results only tell you the chip ID, so you'd need to know who's wearing which one. I also tried creating a team where each chip is assigned to a named person, and I imagine that just puts the initials next to the times. Overall, this is a really exciting piece of kit that I can't believe I used to do without. I can fit the whole timing system in the front pocket of my training bag, even though it does come with a carry case, and I can set it up in the natural breaks between my training runs. The accuracy is plus or minus 0.02 of a second, and I've rarely seen a split time that I thought was questionable. I would recommend the Touch Pro, Touchpad or e-starter if you want to accurately time your acceleration runs. Then again, my sprint coach at university only cared about flying times, so in that case you would only need 2 cones. That might also be true for people in team sports like football or rugby, where a coach might set it up so you run hard one step before the start cone. The only potential downside of Freelap would be to consider how you would integrate it with your current training setup. Can you guarantee that you can set up the cones in a certain lane with your phone after it without disrupting anyone else's session or without them disrupting yours? If you do end up purchasing it, I hope you find it as valuable as I have. Thanks for watching.